Looks like we're reaching some critical mass, so I'll just start some intros. Thanks again for joining this webinar. This is, I think, now our third, or maybe for our fourth official Lifeology SciComm webinar. We're doing these once a month now. They're often accompanying some of the SciComm program Lifeology courses that we're launching. And it's just kind of going to replace our SciComm challenges for the new year as a way to join in a community and learn more about science communication. So today I'm really excited about this webinar, and the panelists are a group of students and graduate PhD students, scientists who have collaborated on several Lifeology courses together about nanotechnology. So Paige, Steph, and Jaya are authors of several Lifeology courses and have collaborated together on Lifeology courses together with their group, as well as artists, to communicate accessibly about nanotechnology. So they're going to be sharing today some lessons learned in that collaboration, and have some really awesome content to help us all become better collaborators in science projects and in science communication projects. So I will let them introduce themselves and then we'll get started. So I'll just call out, Paige, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess I also put our names. So not to worry, this link will be available later. So we're going to move on. So hi, my name is Paige Kinsley.
I'm Jaya Borgata.
And I'm Stephanie Mitchell.
And so today, as Paige said, we're going to be talking about getting to know yourself as a collaborator, as well as like lessons learned during our time as collaborators as well. So for those of you who don't know who we are, we have been scientific collaborators for the past few years. We are all part of a research center called the Center for Sustainable Nanotechnology. And all of our research is sort of focused on understanding fundamental chemistry aspects of nano in the environment and making it sustainable, as well as increasing societal benefit. However, the three of us have sort of also shifted a goal that we have. We are all really interested in increasing accessibility for these concepts that we've been doing research on, as well as developing collaborative skills and also like avoiding burnout. The past year, 2 years during the pandemic has been kind of hard. And so doing these Lifeology collaborations has been a sort of a way of working through that, if you will.
So we've made 2 courses with Lifeology up to this point. The first course is about a nanoparticle named Li, through which we explore nanoparticle physical and chemical properties and the repercussions of nanoparticles in the environment. And then our second course follows a farmer named Fran and how nanoparticles can help enable stronger and healthier crop yields. And by working on these projects as a group, we think we were able to build some stronger courses and over time develop like a really nice and healthy framework for collaboration. So in this workshop, we wanted to share what we've been learning by making these courses and being members of a big center like the CSN, all skills that we think are transferable across all different kinds of collaborations, whether that's writing, research, or whatever else you're passionate about. So today, what we wanted to share and brainstorm with you all is how to develop a healthy collaboration and then take the time to do some reflections on how you might contribute to a team.
So the first thing we're going to do is we sort of want to hear from you about like what you think the value of a collaboration is. So for those of you who have their phones out, you can scan this QR code. Miriam, who's our sort of our technology helper, is also going to drop the link in the chat. And you can also go to just menti.com and go to this code 19238327. Lovely, I see thumbs up. Okay, so the first question that we're gonna sort of talk through, maybe, if Menti behaves, is what is the value of collaboration? So think about like in past collaborations that you've done, why has it been good for you? In future collaborations, why would you want to do it? And like send your answers in thinking about like why you think collaboration is important. So hopefully you're here because it's like sort of something of interest, if anything. And you should be able to submit a couple things or as many things as you want. So we see making big things happen and changes in the world. Yeah, that's definitely important. Using everyone's strengths, getting different viewpoints, getting help on skills you don't have, feeling great, not have to do all the work. Yes, that's so lovely, being able to fill that in. Better science, a different perspective, getting outside of the box. Yeah, the perspectives are really important. Leaning on the knowledge of others, like sort of filling in as people submit things. Yeah. Reinforcing relationships. Yeah, building relationships is really important when doing collaborations, and like for us, like making friends. We're all friends now because of this, yeah, which is exciting. Anything else? Any other big reasons that you think it would be good? So better science. So we're obviously, the three of us are scientists and have collaborated scientifically. More efficient. Yeah, efficiency is really important. But collaboration doesn't have to be just science. Crazy, I know. More fun. Yeah, definitely. Constructive feedback. Yeah, and like learning more about yourself, learning new stuff. Yeah. Cool. These are all really, really, really good ideas. Okay, so this is all wonderful. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And we agree, don't we, Jaya?
Yes, we do. So a lot of what you guys had said in the Menti poll, we definitely agreed with. So we really valued our collaboration working together because we all came from different backgrounds. Our disciplines and skills are different. We all provided our group with different attributes that made our collaboration more successful. And that is due to our life experiences, our cultural contexts, things that we've learned in the past that weren't necessarily science, but our writing skills and way of viewing the world all really helped enhance our collaboration. So those were all excellent points. Thank you for sharing. And we found that our collaboration really pushed us to think creatively, to communicate our science most clearly and effectively to people. So that was creating things like analogies that would relate the science to the real world for somebody who just decided to click into a course. We also were more efficient, as you guys had pointed out, and collectively, we built a lasting relationship as a team and friends and hopefully future collaborators for the rest of our lives. So it was a really wonderful experience. But all collaborations have their own set of challenges. There's never going to be the perfect collaboration. There can be really amazing collaborations. And so for us, one of the issues that we came across sometimes was decision making and our decisiveness. So we think that this is probably due to our context as women, not wanting to step on each other's toes and be really respectful of one another. But it created a lot of standstill moments where we weren't necessarily sure how we should move forward. And we mention this because as you're working in a collaboration, it's really important to be aware of the power dynamics of the group that you're in. So identities like your gender, your seniority, and your race may all play into how people are interacting. And so it's important to be cognizant of them so that everyone is having an equitable shot at the collaboration. Also, the way that your collaboration interacts will change a lot depending on how big your group is and how you decide to structure your leadership. But it should all be done very intentionally so that you're hearing everyone's voice and everyone feels safe in the collaborative environment.
So now that Jaya has talked a little bit about and I think elucidated more on the value of collaboration, we also want to think about now, okay, what is a healthy collaboration? So going back to that Menti poll, which the link should still be in. The next thing we want to sort of hear what your thoughts are on is for like, what is a successful healthy collaboration? Whether these are like collaborations you've done in the past, what has worked before, or like what would you want in a future collaboration, which is also really important. You may have to click next question. Yes, thank you, Miriam. Mutual respect and listening. Yeah, that's really important. Constant communication, definitely. What are other ideas? Value for differences. Yeah, like acknowledging that they're different and that's a good thing. Respecting boundaries. Yeah, figuring out how to like work together but not overwork each other, definitely. Compromise. Yeah, that goes back to like valuing differences. Letting go of your great ideas sometimes. Yes, I love that idea. What else? Transparency about commitments, setting norms. Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that. Transparency, honesty, accountability, mutually understood roles, figuring that out. Flexibility. Yeah, being adaptable. A plan. That's good. Having a plan is an important step. If you go in with no plan, who knows what's going to happen? It's not planned. What are other ideas? Let's see. Happy hour. I can dig it. Yeah, figuring things out that work for everybody. Speaking about your expectations, for sure. Yeah, so there are no surprises. Acknowledging life outside of work, that it exists and that we were humans and that we need to do things outside of work, for sure. Yeah, let's see. Being willing to change how you work if things are not working. Yeah, definitely. Defining responsibilities and expectations. Yeah, I think all of these are really, really important things to think about in making a good collaboration that like will work, won't hurt you, won't like suck the life out of you, because that's a bad collaboration. And that like produces something that you can be proud of, right? Wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much for sharing these. We love getting your thoughts. You're all a bunch of smart people. You have lots of interesting things to share with us, which is lovely. So I'm going to pass it to Steph now to sort of talk it through like the stages of collaboration that we see in the literature.
Thanks. So you all definitely hit on a bunch of things that I'm gonna talk through right now. But this is a pretty quick literature review on how small groups and collaborations develop. So you all suggested a lot of critical things about components of healthy collaborations. And a lot of these like constructive behaviors are integrated throughout this. So just think about how and when you might start to see these good behaviors, and maybe when you would start to want to address more destructive behaviors. And what we've included throughout this presentation are some lovely illustrations by Alberta Torres from our course that we think kind of demonstrate the progression through these stages using the analogy of several people working together to sew a quilt. So importantly, as a lot of you indicated, effective collaborations do not happen by accident. Every member of a team starts from different assumptions, backgrounds, and goals, and therefore probably have different expectations of their teammates and what might be expected of themselves. So this first stage of group development is called forming. This is where the group gets oriented and agrees to the task and goals. And this is the stage that can often get overlooked because it doesn't necessarily feel productive to develop the group instead of actually develop and working on your project. But this is, of course, the best time to get everybody on the same page. So for us, when developing our first course, we didn't do a great job of fighting the urge to like just jump right into the writing and brainstorming course content, which of course then meant we have to go back and backtrack to have like the more fundamental discussion after we'd already done some work. But by our second course, I think we were really able to like slow down, and our first meeting was used to agree upon a goal and a target audience and carefully try to understand where everyone felt their strengths and interests were. The forming stage is also the best time to decide how you would like to communicate with each other and how you prefer to handle conflict, which is an important conversation to have before conflict arises and folks aren't as clear-headed. So for example, we decided it'd be best to communicate by email, and we'd be most productive if we set up some co-working sessions. As the collaboration and project take form, it's also the best time to determine the roles for each of your teammates. So of course, team size can make a difference here. In our experience with just the three of us, we were able to shift roles and responsibilities around as our schedules allowed. But in bigger groups, it's probably very helpful to just assign a leader and then different roles to help your project move forward smoothly. So the second stage of a collaboration is storming. This is the beginning time where you first try to put your framework that you'd established into practice, which also means it's the most likely time for conflict. And really, no matter how well you think you set up your collaboration, putting it into practice will inevitably reveal areas that could use innovating and improving to help everybody work at their best. So if something's not working for all the group members, that is absolutely an opportunity to rework things and develop new solutions, which have the potential to make your project stronger. So for us, this looked like being gracious with each other as we managed writing courses on top of our already varying schedules and grad student research responsibilities, and being flexible as those demands change week to week. Storming is also probably the time when brainstorming for your project also takes place, which is already a very vulnerable time because people are sharing their ideas and are kind of afraid to upset the group dynamic. So storming doesn't necessarily have to look like aggression, but instead like a hesitancy to innovate and offer alternatives, as Jaya mentioned. This was a particular area for us to grow since we got more comfortable with each other, developing a culture of trust and feeling more comfortable voicing our opinions and recommending changes to each other. But of course, if brainstorming sessions and communication styles aren't healthy or productive, they can be corrected by seeing how well they align with the agreed upon goals and culture that was already established in the forming stage. This helps take the burden from saying, I don't like what you're doing to me, instead of like, maybe what you're doing isn't helpful to the goals that we've already established before. It's much less personal and confrontational. So the best way to manage the storming phase is to ensure respectful and open communication, which can be developed by using encouraging and building language.
Yeah, quick question in the chat box. Can you elaborate on gift culture?
Yeah, so this is the idea that I'm not going to do something for you only if you do it back for me. This is being generous with your time. And like, if you can do a thing to help someone out, you should do it without expecting something directly in return, not giving transactional help, but generous help. I hope that explains that.
Yeah, so to sort of take a quick break and sort of talk about communication and potential ways of getting around conflict. There's this idea of yes and that comes from actually improvised comedy. It comes from improv, is where I learned it. And yes and is a way of sort of creating a more efficient and effective dialogue with literally anyone. I use it for my boss a lot, but it's also, I think, in collaborations where you use the idea of yes, you say yes to whatever they've just said to sort of validate their contribution. You like acknowledging that they've said a thing, right? And then and to sort of build off of that, whether you agree with it or not. I think something that we use a lot, especially like in the American English vernacular, is this idea of yes, but. We sort of just say it without even thinking about it. And what yes, but can do is sort of indicate that you maybe sort of listened to the thing that they just said, and that like maybe you're also wrong, which in a receiving end is not super great. It doesn't feel very good. You don't feel listened to. And so even potentially even more, not worse, but like more negative would be no but, which to me indicates I didn't really listen to you and I think you're wrong. And like the thing that you said wasn't valid at all to me. We're moving on, and like the thing that you said wasn't important. And so this idea of yes and is really important, especially in the forming and the storming stages, when you're like doing all of that brainstorming and thinking about these new ideas. You want to ensure that all of your group members and of the people that you're collaborating with, like their ideas feel heard, even if it's not an idea that you use then. You don't want to like essentially knock anybody down while you do things.
Super. Yeah, so that yes and format can really help in the transition from storming into the next stage, which is norming. So this is the unity that happens once you kind of worked through all the kinks and your goal is being fulfilled and the group starts to really communicate well with each other and being able to give and receive feedback in a safe and non-judgmental environment. So there's some tips at the side here, most of which can be summarized by respecting each other's perspectives and feelings. But more specifically, achieving norming would look like starting and ending meetings on time. And then when you're in those meetings, to be as present as possible. So for us, we found that editing together and working together in like a virtual space was super helpful for this. It also helped us check our progress and hit our own deadlines. And another key idea here that I think is a concept that maybe we don't think enough about as adults, probably because the phrase "don't gossip" sounds kind of childish, but don't gossip. In order to have a healthy and innovative collaboration, it's important that all of the members of the collaboration feel like they're not going to be judged behind their back, which then also means you need to directly confront conflict in a group so that everybody can be realigned to the goal. And then once you've journeyed through norming, you've entered the performing stage, and that's where your team is performing to their full potential, and function of the team has just become second nature, and the goal of the project is really what's at the forefront. But we've added a final stage, which isn't necessarily in the literature, but we think is also important, and that's the celebrating stage. This is the time where you take the time to cherish the outcome of your project and thank your collaborators. For us, this kind of looks like the oohing and ahhing over the illustrations of our courses, but maybe this is sharing your publication on Twitter, sending a photo of something you're really proud of to your family, whatever you got. But it's also helpful to take the time to reflect on your growth as a collaborator and the characteristics of the team that you found to be really helpful or disruptive to the team's mission, and things that you may want to consider before undergoing your next collaboration. So we were able to take the time to treasure our collaboration by writing this Lifeology course and then reflecting on our growth throughout the process and even just building this presentation together. But what we wanted to do next was give you all some time to do some of that reflection. So to do some honest self-evaluation about your own strengths and where you would like to improve.
So we're going to take a couple minutes of self-reflection, independent time to reflect on our own constructive and destructive behaviors. So Miriam is going to drop a link in the chat that you can follow to get a little bit more information on these behaviors. But just take a minute, think about how you've been in the past in group situations or collaborations, and see where you feel like you're really strong and have helped move things forward. And then the things that you kind of do and sometimes go, ugh, I did it again. So I'll just take a 2 minutes on your own.
And by the end of the 2 minutes, like, try to pick one constructive and one destructive, and then we're going to sort of talk about things as a group.
All right, I'll end the poll and we can look at the results.
I think, yeah, before we look at the results, before we do the big reveal, we wanted, the three of us wanted to sort of, like, I feel like all of you are sharing things that may be a little bit vulnerable, I think, in thinking about constructive but particularly destructive behaviors. And so we don't want to ask anything that we aren't willing to share ourselves as well. So we can end, I guess we'll end the poll and we'll also talk for a second. So because I'm talking, and I think this potentially sort of speaks to my destructive behavior, I think for my destructive behavior, something that I know about myself as a collaborator is that I'm a dominating. I tend to be the first to speak up. If I feel silences, I want to like get things going. So I guess there's a little bit of rushing. Everybody has a bunch of things. It's fun. And I think for constructive behaviors, I think I'm good at cooperating. In all of my domination, I tend just to want to like make everybody sort of do the things that they need to.
And then, yeah, not too dissimilar. I'm going to start with my constructive behavior, which I think is clarifying. I like at the end after a conversation to make sure that I know what I need to do, which I find helpful for me and that I hope is then helpful for other people that I'm working with, that like we've come to a conclusion and know what needs to happen next. And I think that also lends itself, I think I also identify the most with the dominating one, because in my mind, I have kind of like a clear picture of how I think the best organization is. And then of course, I think someone had mentioned like in the characteristics of a good collaboration, you have to be willing to let go of your ideas sometimes. And that can be really hard to do because it's in your mind and it's going to work out so well, but knowing that other people have exactly the same process of their own ideas and knowing that all these multiple ideas can come together to make something bigger is like something we need to actively fight against.
And then for me, I think I guess my constructive behaviors are more along the lines of harmonizing. Like I like to try to listen, and if I hear something that I thought was really good, I always am like, this person said this really great thing, let's try to build on that. So I try on a good day to build the harmony and make sure that everyone feels heard, and the ideas that I think are awesome are being promoted. And then my destructive behaviors, I think I digress. So I'm one to go on a tangent sometimes or not stay focused on the path that we're necessarily working on. And then because I've digressed, that can sometimes lead to rushing. So I think rushing is probably something that every graduate student experiences, but yeah, those are mine. Thank you guys for all sharing yours in the poll. And thank you to Paige and Steph for sharing yours as well. So now we're sharing our poll. And in going through this, I think it's very clear that you guys are a very unique group. So everyone has their own attributes that they bring to a collaboration, be it cooperating or clarifying or inspiring, harmonizing, risk-taking. Here as a collective, we have people who are awesome at all of those abilities. And so thinking about that, I guess that reinforces the idea that a collaboration is able to take all of our strong attributes and bring them together. And then again, we're all a diverse group with our destructive habits, and different people will bring different challenges to a group, and understanding those challenges and how to work with them is really important. So we're going to go through some questions to kind of reflect on this a little bit more. So if you are comfortable, we invite you to respond either in the chat to everyone, the chat to directly to panelists, and then we can read them out loud if you want a more anonymous way of sharing. Or if you really want to share, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, and you can join the verbal conversation. So our first question is, what effect do you think your constructive and destructive behaviors have had in your past collaborations or current collaborations?
I'm happy to go first as well for effects on collaborations. I know I have specific collaborations that I'm talking about today that I know things have happened on. And I think part of it is my dominating destructive is something that I sort of have to draw back on. I don't know, Steph and Jai could probably speak about it a little bit more, but sometimes I talk a lot. I have all of these good ideas, right? So good. And they've been very patient with me as we've sort of like adjusted and like acknowledged how we need to do things. Even I think for this, even if you don't have any like current collaborations or past collaborations, how do you imagine like certain behaviors might affect for the benefit or not future collaborations, whether it's in science or writing or just like going to the grocery store. You can collaborate on that, right?
And I guess while more people are thinking, I feel like I can like explicitly say two of the things like I've learned from each of you, and like Paige's like particular benefit on me during the collaboration is just like I learned a lot more grammar. Which is, yeah, like you had like these excellent writing skills that I was really able to like learn from, and like the way you edited I particularly learned from. And then as Jaya mentioned, like her always giving credit for ideas was something that I thought was like super beautiful, and like is something that I actively now try to take forward. Like if someone has a good idea and maybe it gets blown past, like actually giving name to that person and like their idea. Because of course, like if I repeat the idea, it might sound like I'm trying to take it instead of lifting up someone else's voice.
Yeah. So we have a couple good things in the chat. Miriam said she imagined certain pairings could be particularly troublesome, like a person who tends to dominate and a person might withdraw with that. Yeah, definitely. Where the balance would essentially go all the way in one direction, and then one person isn't doing anything, the other person is, and it's probably to not good parts of the collaboration. Megan has shared, I think my dominating trait has made others I'm collaborating with think a decision that has already been made, so I can't be changed. Yeah. As a result, maybe people don't feel like they can offer their thoughts or ideas. Yeah, Megan, I have similar things where like I say a thing in like a very like potentially just like, yes, this is the thing that's happening, and people are like, what? Can we question this? Paige Giroux has added tending to withdraw when she doesn't feel like my feedback or advice is being appreciated is definitely a weakness. Oh, for sure. Which is why having somebody that harmonizes, or somebody that like adds and says, oh, like I affirm the thing that you just said, is so important. So sort of like how Jai is for us. Courtney has added, when I withdraw after frustration, or I feel like I'm not being heard, I'm not bringing my best ideas to the table, and I also not listening to others. Yeah, so there are multiple layers, right? If you're not being listened to, why would you listen to anybody else, right? It's not worth it. And like staying engaged when it doesn't necessarily seem like that like it's worth it anymore, I think is very much something that happens. Cool. Okay, so we have another question that we would like you to reflect on.
So this question is, how will knowing these behaviors change how you collaborate or approach group interactions in the future? How do they affect how you respond to conflict? And I invite you to also in the chat at this moment, share how your positive attributes, if you're comfortable, have positively affected your collaborations in the past. So this question could skew a little negative, and if you're in a positive headspace, please, by all means, put it in the chat.
I think something that I've learned during my collaborating with Jai and Steph, and also reflecting on constructive and destructive behaviors, is just like acknowledging that I need to check myself and like figure out how much airtime I've used up when I'm talking. Obviously, I'm using up a lot today, as you can see. And sort of checking is like, is it good? Is it beneficial? Am I actually adding anything, or am I just saying things? Have other people said things yet? Do they need to? Mike has added, recognizing my dominating behavior, especially in meetings, has helped me to be more mindful of checking myself. Yeah, similar. Still working on not filling silence. I know it's so hard. It's so hard. And I know for me, I think being in the Midwest, you just like, you don't want any kind of like awkward silences. And so you fill it with things. Are those things helpful? Maybe not. Courtney added, maybe taking note of his others' behaviors and trying to fit one of the other behaviors not in the collaboration could be helpful. Sure, yeah. Knowing that they exist and like acknowledging that you fit in some ways and other people fit in other ways, I think is important, especially for having patience maybe when somebody might have a destructive behavior that they're not super aware of.
Yeah, as someone who also feels like they accidentally dominate sometimes, when I felt like I was doing that, it was like it was a real red flag for me that I should specifically each ask one of you, not just say, how do you all feel? I'd be like, Jaya, how do you feel about that? And like specifically chisel out space
Mhm.
for someone else to speak up, which maybe is a little intimidating, but I feel like when you like broadly open it, even just amongst our group of 3, it's much more easy to have that quiet response.
Yeah. So Adam added a really interesting comment that I think we should talk about. Adam says, I can identify my destructive behaviors, but I'm not sure how to avoid them. For example, I withdraw when my ideas are ignored. And then like, what do you do from there, right? I think something that we've talked about is like in forming a collaboration ever, using like having a conversation with your collaborators before you get started on constructive and destructive behaviors and acknowledging them from the beginning can essentially do what we're sort of doing now and help people reflect on how it might impact and how it might affect the collaboration and sort of what you can do from there. So I think Adam, like knowing that you're withdrawing, you could also say like, oh, I think that's what's happening right now. And maybe you can sort of push yourself to like re-engage just a little bit, right? And I think just like having an awareness of it is the first step to like actually being able to like change the habits that are like super valid, right? Withdrawing when you're not being listened to is like a valid thing to do. And I think can obviously sort of affect the collaboration.
Yeah, and
go ahead,
withdrawing
Steph.
doesn't necessarily mean that your voice needs to be heard less. It can feel weird to then propose your own ideas once again when you feel like they've already been rejected, which of course has a lot to do with the way people reject ideas. For us, we like did a lot of like, oh, this idea is great. We're not sure if it fits the goal right now. And it just got moved down lower in the doc so we could still keep all of our ideas around and visible in case we wanted to call back on them again. But framing ideas as though they're bad is of course never actually even true. All ideas are incredibly helpful and can change and improve your project. But yeah, acknowledging, I think as Paige mentioned, acknowledging that there are these constructive and destructive behaviors even in the beginning could be really helpful because there are people who have the strength of harmonizing. And if they know that this is something particularly that you struggle with, like they're going to want to help bolster you up.
Yeah. Paige J has added in the chat, she finds strength in my ability to bring people together and assimilate different views and perspectives in the collaboration product. So that cooperating strength helps. Yes, most definitely. Being like knowing that that is something that you're really good at means you can say like, okay, that's sort of potentially part of my role in this because it's a strength of mine. Megan added, I think having the language to name these behaviors will be helpful. It'll be easier to handle conflict when issue can be specifically named. Yes, having the vocabulary is really important. Instead of just saying like, I just feel like just bad. And you're just like, I feel bad and like not great. And I just don't feel seen, you know? And like those feelings are valid, but sometimes it's hard to talk through them. So definitely having words for it and saying like, I know this about myself as a collaborator, and sort of going from there for sure.
And I think as we're like alluding to, noting your destructive behavior, of course, does not mean that you get to like stop cold turkey. Like Adam's identifying the withdrawal, that does not mean that you need to like all of a sudden get over that and then like start volunteering your ideas again. That could just mean taking a little smaller step and supporting an idea that you like that belongs to someone else to help re-get your voice back and to build more confidence. Trying to take away from dominating conversation doesn't mean you need to stop talking. It means maybe the baby step of letting someone else talk first and then coming in with your idea. There are little ways I think that we can start to practice catching ourselves that aren't so like harsh and hard to fulfill.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for everybody for sharing. Chad, you want to go?
Yeah, so let's just take another 2 minutes on your own to reflect a little bit more. We've been doing verbal reflections, but it could be important or helpful to just write a note of any surprises, insights, or revelations and how you want to carry this forward in your future collaborations or interactions. Alrighty, thank you all so much for sharing. It's really special that you were vulnerable with us, and something that we've definitely found as a group is that being comfortable being vulnerable and throwing out your crazy idea is a really important way of working together and collaborating as a group. So thank you for taking that step today in this webinar. So we'll move on.
Yeah. So we are now at the end, or sort of the end. So for final thoughts, like I just want to sort of repeat what Jaya said. Thank you all for sharing and coming today. So this webinar came from a collaborative Lifeology course that we wrote on collaborative science writing, which is where all of the beautiful images come from. So if you haven't seen that, I think it's in the chat, but also if you want to see it in this QR code. Also, if you want to continue sort of reflect on yourself as a collaborator, we have an activity that you can go to the QR link on this guy, which is sort of reflecting on science writing, collaborating specifically, but I think it can be used for anything. And like Paige said, Paige J, not Paige K, like Paige J said at the beginning, Lifeology is going to be doing these webinars about once a month moving forward. So if you're interested in learning more about science writing, science communication in general, and different aspects of it, whether it's coming from the artist perspective or anything else, you can see the link at the bottom of this slide on to find any future things. Before we take questions, we would just like to sort of acknowledge the collaborators that we had and the people that we've worked with for this. So everybody in the CSN that we've worked with, particularly Dr. Jason White and Dr. Mike Schwartz, who've actually worked on our science lifeology courses. Obviously, Dr. Paige Giroux for having us, Dr. Miriam Krause, who has been sort of our benefactor of sorts. She is the Director of Education and Outreach for the CSN and has been very, very kind in giving us the opportunity to do all this. The unbelievable artists that we've worked with, Alfie Chong and Alberta Torres. And then we also have QR codes to our previous courses, but also have Alfie, and we've talked to Elfie and Paige for our podcast for the CSN on our experience working as well. So with all of that, something to know that this presentation will be linked somewhere in the recording of this. So we'll take questions, but we also have a resource list that y'all will have access to as well. So for now, I will stop sharing my screen and we are happy to take any questions.
Or comments and
Or
thoughts.
comments,
Anything
whatever.
is welcome.
So there's a Q&A section. If you want to drop a question that's anonymous there, I think you can do that. Otherwise, you could pop it in the chat too. Yeah, I'll throw a question in just in the last few minutes if no one has one. And perhaps some of the folks here would be interested in, like, were there any specific challenges that came up or insights or things in y'all's collaboration on the nanotechnology? You spoke to that a little bit, but on the nanotechnology collaboration course, or even on this like course that y'all wrote about collaboration.
I think something that Steph kind of brought up earlier was in the first nanotech course, we didn't go into it with a goal. The only goal that we kind of had as a group was let's make a lifeology course and work with artists and it will be a great experience. But I think that is something that we definitely brought to the forefront for all of the rest of our communications, was having a very clear goal for why we were doing this course, who we wanted to reach, what we thought it would be a lesson for, and relating everything that we did after that to that goal was really helpful. And I think it made the first one, it was a time where we were kind of in our storming phase of like figuring out how we wanted to work together. But then our latter collaborations have all been really wonderful and very smooth, and we definitely learned from it.
I think something that sort of added to that, the fact that we didn't really have a goal, is that we also hadn't really talked about timeline. So we sort of just like did things and did continue to do things. And we're like, we never really had an explicit discussion about like, how long will this actually take? We just met for a while. And then eventually it came out, and we were very lucky that the final product and the people we worked with produced this beautiful thing. And I think it was a discussion that should have been had. Rebecca in the chat asked, what tips do you have for navigating a collaboration with someone way outside your work area? That is such a good question. And it's something that we did during this, because the people we were working with, it was the three of us who are all scientists. We had like science experts that we also talked with. So Jason White and Mike Schwartz, but we were also working with artists that had like sort of some amount of science background. And then we also were working with people at Lifeology who like edited things for us. So Jai, Steph, are there any things that come to mind like immediately?
Go ahead, Jaya.
I'll go quick. So I think deferring to expertise was something that we did really well. Is we took the artist's vision as the artist wanted to give it to us. We didn't really question too much, and we kind of ran with what other people's expertise was telling them fit best. And I think that that's true in science too. You have to trust that your collaborator is doing the best that they can, and trust that they're correct and respect them in that way. I had something else, but it's not coming to mind, so I'll defer to Steph.
Well, pop back right in when you got it before it escapes. Yeah, and I think like when you know someone is such an expert in something way outside your area, for me at least, it was more easy to like truly trust them, because it was not an area of expertise that I had, than if something's like kind of close to yours, because you know a little bit more, and that also like as like a little bit more of a dominator and like a rusher, like I know, so like I will want to take care of it instead of like collaborating. And then like kind of to tie in with Megan's question about the impact of being at different institutions on the collaboration, being able to work over a platform was super duper helpful. So even like in our first meetings with the artist, being able to meet with them in person, actually talk through the course was so much more productive than multiple emails back and forth. And then we could really kind of explain concepts and get feedback about where they imagined some confusion would be, so that we could help improve our course also based on their feedback. We didn't just send off completely polished words to the artist. We actually got some really helpful feedback about how we could clarify some ideas throughout, so that their images could even shine more and like be more helpful to our work. And I think when you work with someone outside your area, the rushing is what's really dangerous. Not taking the time to put in helpful information, remember where you were when you didn't know something, to help really, improve it. But yeah, I think like being able to work on Zoom was like a huge benefit for us. Oh, product placement in Zoom.
I mean, so along with that is in all of the work. So while we were working on things, Jai and I were in Madison, Steph was in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was still in the middle of a pandemic, so nobody could see anybody. And so along with using Zoom as a platform to like actually see each other's faces, we did all of our work in Google Docs. And so what that allowed us to do is sort of like see like live time changes and talk through live time changes of our course, edit together, make suggestions together. And I think that's also something that I think ties into like both Megan and Rebecca's questions is when you're working with somebody way outside your area, you still want to have a place that you can like sort of like share ideas like an explicit place where you can share ideas and like try to sort of exchange information and ensure that like clarity can happen. And I think that in like virtual face to virtual face conversations is going to be more effective than just like sort of throwing words in an email and hoping that all of the things, all the nuances are picked up. So I think there's that as well.
We're closing in, but yeah, we'll do one more question.
Yeah. So Adam asked, what are some good tools to nurture collaboration?
I can tackle this one. So I think there are two schools of thought here. One, it's important to get to know the people you work with personally. So there is definitely room for silly icebreakers in a new collaboration, like getting to know someone outside of the 2D video maybe that they show on your Zoom, knowing that they have interests outside of that. And then that also helps, I think, you not get like as maybe like angry if something doesn't work out perfectly. You realize you're dealing with a complex individual who has stuff outside happening. So I think taking the time maybe for a little chit chat at the top of each meeting can actually help. Like 5 minutes of chit chat, because you also want to respect that everybody is there for a job to do. But of course, there are also actual team building exercises. And this is like not a trust fall. Like that isn't really helping develop the skills that you need to communicate well. And there's actually been some like pretty interesting literature on like, yeah, the difference between actual team building and like team, whatever a trust fall is. Like you're not really building anything. So yeah, and as far as tools, like I think a lot of that comes in the beginning when you have those initial conversations about how you want to communicate with each other and where everybody's boundaries are and how to respect. Tools is where I'm struggling. Like, I don't know, there's not maybe an app for that.
I think something that could be, and this is like forming collaborations or like any groups, is like very explicitly setting expectations, whether that's like in an actual expectations document or having a very explicit conversation about expectations, both like the administrative, so like what platform are we going to communicate on, but also like how to sort of go about having conversations, like establishing that like everybody should respect everybody else, right? But having those written down, I think, gives you the opportunity to, if something comes up, you have something to point to later on. And you say like, we have this thing that we talked about, if you remember, and like, we're trying to do this thing and we're still trying to work together. Like, can we have a conversation about it? Because that was sort of a thing that we could do. And so I think expectations documents can be good as well, especially if the collaboration is going to potentially be like a little bit more long-term. If it's like over like months or years, having that you can like edit and like go back to and ensure that everybody's sort of on the same page. Because assuming that like people like understand the world the way you do, that's often where things are going to start breaking down.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of good like mentoring contracts that could be well adapted for maybe a smaller collaboration of like 5 people.
Awesome. This has been so great. I mean, I'll just throw in there too, just from my experience of working with this team, is just being flexible. I mean, there's tons of tools out there like Google Docs and Slack and Trello, and there's tools for like managing collaboration, but you kind of have to check in with all the collaborators to be like, does everyone here, do you not, some people might not prefer to have a chat, to be in Slack all the time, and those tools are only as good as people are going to use them. Sometimes there's security issues. We work with clients who are like, they can't use Google Docs and we have to use something else because of security issues with their organization. So I think just being flexible with your tools is also important, because you have to see what everybody else wants to use as well. Well, this has been so great. Thanks, Paige, Steph, and Jaya for this amazing webinar. I don't know about the attendees, but I think they've done an amazing job. I've learned a lot. Excited that we'll also have this webinar available as a recording so people can come back to it later and share it with friends that you think, or share with collaborators that you think might need a little training. But yeah, this has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for
Awesome.
coming.
Yeah, well, we'll sign off, everyone. Visit the SciComm website for our webinars page for recording later. All right, bye.